Hello, and welcome to Transformations Cafe, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Cafe is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization whose vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. And our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to visit us at our website, theglobaltransformation.org. And if you would like to join us, there's a join button at the top of each webpage. And if you'd like to support our work, including programs like this one, there's a donate button also at the top of every page that'll take you straight through to PayPal. This program is being recorded and it will be published on IFGT's YouTube channel. So we also invite you to subscribe to that channel and click the bell icon once you do so, so you can be notified when we publish new content, including this program. This program today is a continuation of what we began with last month's program to explore what is referred to in some spiritual communities or philosophies as the wisdom or the ancient wisdom or the perennial philosophy or perennial wisdom. Those are somewhat synonymous terms. And so I invite you to go back and see last month's interview on YouTube with Doug Scott. Today, we intend to delve into ways that we can actually live the wisdom, that we can not just know these things as information or concepts, but to bring them into what we might call our everyday lives. And or another term I use a lot is taking the meditation off the cushion, so that if we're actually going to do what we espouse in our mission and vision to transform humanity and consciousness, it's going to have to become part of what we are doing in all aspects of our lives. So that's the goal of our conversation tonight. And our guest is someone who I think is going to give us tremendous tools and insights and thoughts and suggestions, etc., on how we can actually live the wisdom rather than just knowing it. Our guest is Mr. Dianne Collins, who is a master QuantumThink coach and strategic QuantumThink consultant. And I want to say at the outset that Alan is also a member of IFGT's advisory council. So Alan, here a chance to thank you publicly for the many years of help and support you've given this organization, as well as everything else wonderful that you do. So I would like to thank you for that. And also want to note that with us tonight in the audience is Alan's wife and partner, I believe you say, in all parts of your life, Dianne Collins. And Dianne is both the author of the book that Dianne and Alan's subsequent work is largely based on. And that book is Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World. And Dianne's also a member of IFGT's board of directors. And we interviewed Dianne about 2 years ago, focusing on the book. And so if folks are interested, that interview is available on our YouTube channel. So at this point in the introduction, I usually read a bio, but something moved me this program to just invite Alan to maybe give some background, his version of his life, and kind of what has led him to the work that he and Dianne are doing now. So welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I've had kind of an interesting life, I think, because I grew up in London, England, and spent the very first part of my life from, in my 20s and 30s in the beauty business. And I was a hairdresser, actually. And from there, I was in that business for a while. And I recognized at some point along the way that this was not something that I wanted to do or didn't feel like driven to, like it wasn't purposeful enough for me to live my whole life doing. It was really fun doing it when I did it. I worked with a lot of celebrities and moved to the United States, and it continued on here. And so I was having a good time with it, but it did not seem like something that I could, rest my hat on, so to speak, for the rest of my life. Well, actually, one of my clients asked me to join her in a program, a transformational program, which I ended up doing. And then I had a great realization, because something was kind of gnawing at me. And it was my relationship with my parents, because my parents were in England and I was in the United States, and I was an only child. So I had this kind of chipping away at me. And as much as I loved them, I didn't feel the strong connection. Like when I was with them, it just wasn't, there was something missing. And so when I did this program, that was really what I was after. I was after taking my relationship to a whole nother level with my parents, like where I felt really connected. And it happened. I did have that experience, and that it was a transformational experience, and it sustained itself throughout the rest of my life with my parents. So that really gave me the first introduction to what a transformation looked like. And it was so powerful and so exciting that I pursued a career in that area. I got out of the hairdressing business. I went to work for a company that did these kind of programs on a public level. And then I became a consultant using their material. And then along the way, I met Dianne. What happened was Dianne said, Alan, I think you could be doing a lot more with yourself than working just for these people. And she saw more. And so I ended my relationship there. And then Dianne and I started working together. And Dianne, being who she is, she started to create some programs for me to lead. Dianne wrote a letter, and we sent it out to our mailing list. And we were just, I can't remember what the letter said, but it was an invitation to a program that we had developed, and we had a tremendous response to it. And that led from one thing to another. That program was so powerful. It was a QuantumThink program. Dianne is, she invented QuantumThink, so it was a QuantumThink program, and it was a phenomenal program. We called it QuantumThink 21. It took place over 21 days. And then, and it was so powerful that the people that were in it, who responded to it, wanted to take it into their companies. And so that program took us into Accenture. It took us into McKinsey. It took us into the United States government and some affiliate agencies. And all of a sudden, we were, delivering QuantumThink all over the place. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous. And the experience that I had when I did my first transformational program led to these people, and it just took off, and people were having amazing experiences in business and in their personal lives, and both at the same time. And, and QuantumThink took off. And it was the highlight of my day when I got to lead, when I was leading QuantumThink programs, because I knew absolutely there was going to be transformations galore from the people in there. And one of the discoveries that I've made, which sort of fits into something you asked me before we got onto this call here, Ken, was I find that the more people know, the more that gets in the way.
Yes.
So the beauty of me doing the QuantumThink programs was that people didn't know anything about it. And clearly the ability to be able to do something, and being able to put what you know aside, or at least be aware enough to notice when you're comparing something new to something you've already done, that gets in the way tremendously. And so, great many of our successes have been with people that have never heard about QuantumThink, don't know anything about it at all, including, we delivered one of our programs to a judicially appointed school for young men young boys actually, who had committed crimes. And these young boys, they never heard of the word quantum. That was foreign to them completely. and they participated in our program, and we had tremendous results with these young boys who had no idea what we were talking about, actually. So anyway, so this went along the way, and then we, I've been delivering QuantumThink along with Dianne. Both of us have been delivering QuantumThink into corporations since then. And and I'm not a highly what I would consider. I didn't come from Harvard or anything like that. I grew up on the street. I'm a street kind of guy, and that's I think a quality that I've enjoyed. So I've kept the academics out of it, and for me, it's like real time. What's going on in the moment, what do you need in the moment, and how QuantumThink plays out in those moments to really make a difference in people's lives, and certainly made a difference in Dianne and I's life, and the way we live our life and how we live our life, and enjoy delivering QuantumThink to all kinds of people all around the world. We've delivered it to thousands of people all over the world. All people from all shapes and sizes and colors and ideas and whatever. So we've had a good time with it, and we continue to do it, because it's our purpose in life. It's what we love to do, and we're always looking at new ways of doing it.
Well, you just answered the question why I might have decided to not go the standard route and read your bio, because most of that isn't in there. And that was a fantastic explanation that I hadn't heard. And I think it really is just a wonderful way to kind of begin this conversation about, what it is and what got you there. To prepare for these conversations, Alan reached out to me about 6 weeks ago and said, probably the best thing for you to do to prepare is we're going to gift you one of our audio coaching programs, and it's called QuantumThink Experience Audio Coaching Program. And before we get into maybe some of that nitty gritty, are there any other kind of summaries that you could provide of what the program is, just to give people that have never heard of it maybe a better sense of it, as at least an overview? And I do want to mention at this point too, we'll have links in the YouTube show notes, but if you go to the classes section on IFGT's website, there's links there, because Dianne and Alan have also generously made arrangements for the course to be made available through our website. And so we wanted to make sure that folks are aware that if this strikes your fancy and you want to pursue it more, you can get to it through links in the show notes and on the IFGT website. So, but if you have, I know it's a lot to say, well, here's what it is, and put it in a bumper sticker, but just to maybe get some clarity.
I can do a little bit of that. I mean, of course, Dianne's on the phone, and she's really the creator of QuantumThink. But interestingly enough, with two aspects that I missed when I was doing my introduction here, is that one thing that Dianne and I have done for the last 30 years, 34 years that we've been married, is that we have a spiritual practice. And QuantumThink is definitely based in a higher level of knowledge. That would be a conscious level of knowledge that we have gained a lot from our spiritual practice through Siddha Yoga, through the Siddha Yoga meditation centers, and that that's played a big role in our life as well. So they're there, and that is also part of QuantumThink. This QuantumThink is really it's a system of thinking. And I think, it's a system of thinking. And I say underscore the word system, because for some people that may mean something, for some others maybe not. But that everything on the planet, not only everything in the universe, functions in systems. You've got the cosmic systems, where you've got the planetary system. There's nothing random out there. Those planets are moving properly, and if you look at it, if you look at the moon and the sun and the earth, it's given us our complete experience of time, and our calendars are run by this. So that's a pretty important system. Right. And then if you come down to Earth and you're looking at nature systems, that we're dealing with the changing seasons and how nature works. And there's nothing random about it. It may seem random because we don't want to get hit by a hurricane, but the point is it's very organized It works everything's in harmony with everything else. Every ant, every bird, every fish, every animal, including us, everything is working in sync with each other. And, you know, this is on the larger scale. You come down to the everyday scale. You go in, if you went into a store to buy a pair of shoes, if there wasn't a system in place, you'd be there all day, maybe all week, looking for a pair of shoes. And even if you could find two that matched, right? So, right. So everything functions in systems, and we know a little bit about it because of the judicial system and the educational systems and the legal systems and what have you. So everything is a system. And I think one of the key revelations that Dianne had is that if everything functions in a system, so does thinking.
Right.
And so, you know, so this was like, if thinking is a system, what is the system? And I think that, you know, part of that, what Dianne in her studies and how she's challenged herself in her life, is to look at everything that's going on, all the different disciplines. And what she really came to, that if, you know, was as more of a spiritual, on the spiritual side of things, that thought creates reality, which is something that's been spoken by every tradition that we know of in some way, shape, or form, that thought creates reality. So I think the big question that Dianne was in was, if thought creates reality, what creates thinking? What creates thought? And this brought her to science and the relationship of science and spirituality. And that science, that what we've been living in for the last 400 years, is a system that was given to us by Newtonian science. And it's the Newtonian science worldview. Worldview meaning what we believe to be true about the way things work, basically. Right, on a large scale and on a small scale. And so what she discovered was that the laws and principles of this 400 years Newtonian worldview, that the laws and principles of that has really shaped our thinking. As an example, just one quick example, is that one of the principles is, from the Newtonian worldview, is that reality is fixed and static, and it's made up of solid objects. And so that gave us the industrial age. That gave us the invention of machines to move the things that we physically couldn't move because they were too large or too heavy, right? And that's where it started. And so now so when Dianne invented the quantum worldview, she was looking at quantum science and where quantum science and the wisdom of the spiritual masters connected. And one of the key points of quantum science is what is called the observer effect. Mm-hmm. And so it's an observer. And we have one of the distinctions of QuantumThink, of which there are 21, is that it's an observer created reality. It is not a fixed circumstantial reality. So and how that plays out, and this is important. So this is one little tidbit about it. If you're operating in the Newtonian worldview and you're seeing things as fixed and solid, and it's not like you're thinking about it, it's in the background shaping how you think, shaping the meaning you give to what you see and what you know and what you think you can do and what's possible. And so how that plays out is that we tend to, as human beings, we see things as that's the way it is. That would be a statement that correlates with things are fixed and solid and static. So we think of our husband, oh, my husband's this way, my wife is that way, my kids are this way, my business is that way, my boss is this way, my company is this way. And we hear that all the time. I hear it all the time in business. We all hear it in the way that we live our lives, right? So this is the way it is. And that statement, this is the way it is, correlates perfectly with a fixed reality.
And then that gets even gooier, doesn't it? Because would you say that should is also part of that thinking?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It should be this way. It should be that way. If only this, if only that. It could be that. It could be this. These are all consistent to a fixed reality. And so when people begin to see that, and learn, like what they're learning when they're learning quantum think is they're learning how the old worldview and its principles, like where it sees the world. I'll give you a couple of examples here. It sees the world, the old worldview is machine-based as opposed to the new world, which is mind-based. It's matter, as I mentioned. We see the world in separate parts. The old worldview is there, the statement that the whole is made up of the sum of its
parts. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And new worldview is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Well, that's a whole different thing, because if the whole is made up of the sum of its parts, whatever you think the whole is, you're going to be limited to what you see.
Well, and this is very much along the lines of the hopes for this particular conversation, this episode, if you will, of this program, is to break some of those old world view thoughts down, that when I have parts of my life where I'm being spiritual, if you will, or I do my meditation and then might go right out and just repeat the same things that I repeat day in and day out, have the same frustrations, have the same disappointments, the same highs and lows, that are not incorporating whatever knowledge and or experience you had when you were in that higher frame of mind, if you will.
Right. Yeah. And you can see how just this thing, like just the law of the old worldview that sees things as that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Is going to keep it in place. And you can't create something new on top of something that already exists. It won't be new. You will have changed what already exists, but by virtue, and this is another distinction of quantum think, transformation is distinct from change, is that the more you try to change it, the more you keep it in place. And there's like it expands. What you put your attention on expands. So the very thing you want to try to actually get rid of, you don't want to really change it. You want to have it disappear. But you can't, because because in the context, in the background of a fixed reality, it's always going to be there because it's absolute. And in the quantum worldview, there are no absolutes. So, so this is what we're looking at. So in quantum thing, what we do is we do distinguish the old worldview and how it works, not for the purpose of trying to change it or trying to get rid of it, but to create a new relationship with it.
That's beautiful.
Right? You see what I'm saying? So one where we're not stuck with it. So and then we have, we have two systems here. And this is really interesting because we're really functioning here from a quantum think perspective with two systems. We have the old system of thinking, which has been around for 400 years that we're not trying to get rid of. We have that system. And we have this new system that Dianne invented called QuantumThink, which is a system of thinking made up of 21 distinctions. We call them distinctions in thinking that are consistent to quantum science, the laws and principles of quantum science, and how they correlate perfectly with the spiritual wisdom that has been handed down by the masters for forever.
Yeah, that is something that I would say I did find when I went through the program you gave me. Seeing that interaction of the way we classically think about the world and been conditioned to, seeing different ways of thinking about it, as well as seeing how the quantum science principles are intersected with all of this. And so in fact, you mentioned a moment ago, like the observer effect.
Right.
And I think, just to, again, to give my personal sense of this, is that there are certain old world view perspectives that we're looking for, that thing that's going to make our life better or change. We think it's the program that is going to be the ticket. And you said it's actually within us. It's, the program is a guide basically, but then when you learn that, and so this this idea of being able to not expect that quantum science is some kind of magic and there are spells to be cast or chants to be learned or anything along those lines, but that when you really drop the labels and you look at something like the observer effect, and is what you were kind of talking about a moment ago, if you're trying to fix something or change something, as long as you're viewing it as the problem to be fixed, that's the form it's going to take.
Yeah.
That's the reality you've brought in, and that's how you're at least perceiving it and operating it. But in your world, it's still the problem because you're trying to fix the problem.
Right.
And as you get more familiar with the material you've made available, you can see that from just a very different perspective.
Yeah. Because what we
But it
want
doesn't mean that it's gone all of, it's all gone. And like you said, we're not trying to replace the old system, but introduce the new one alongside it.
right, but you can alter your experience with it entirely. That's what the transformation is. That's like the transformation I had with my parents, right? Whatever was there before just disappeared. It never came back again. And that is a real transformation where it's not committed to memory. You're not using your memory. You're not trying to do a process. When a transformation takes place, you transcend the current form. You go into a whole nother, you've gone into another dimension, actually, and you're functioning in that dimension. And QuantumThink, in a way, is the tools to actually do that. And it's interesting what you say, because when people go through our programs, and I've noticed this, because thousands of people have done QuantumThink over the years, thousands of them. And I hear three things when people complete the program. I hear one group of people tell me, I didn't get anything out of it at all. Okay, that's one group. However, very interestingly, the people around them notice something is very different about them. They can't admit it because they just, for whatever reason, I don't know, they don't want to feel that somebody outside of them had more influence on them than them themselves, so they can't actually acknowledge that anything happened, even though it is visible in the people around them. That's one group of people. Then there's a large group of people, the largest group of people, which goes to what you were saying before, Ken, is that they think it was the program. Yeah. Now the program obviously gives them the thinking, it gives them the tools, it gives them the way. It gives them the way. But that it isn't the program, because the program's not going to be there forever. The program is something they just did. And then there is a very unique group of people that recognize that when they get a result in life, they can distinguish where their thinking influenced that result. They can make the connection between the transparent, which is thinking. Thinking is not physical. It's transparent. It's in the energy field. Thoughts and thinking, and those are two different things. We'll talk about that later. But that the thinking, they can distinguish very precisely the connection between their thinking and the outcome. And then those people are now not looking outside of themselves for the result, which is a program. They're looking internally at the result. And ultimately, that's where we have to get to be able to create a transformation in our lives, and to be able to live the life that we want, and to be happy, and impact the things we want to impact. It has to be internal. It cannot be external, even though external can play a significant role.
So there's a part of this that I think to move individual and collective consciousness along, there has to be this transformative shift in thinking that really understands all of what you present. And I only was presented with the first 10 distinctions, so it's nice to know there are 11 more. So but this idea that more and more people, at least that I am attending to, are talking about things that from a classic worldview are extremely difficult for many human minds to get their minds around. And yet the quantum science has proven through experiments that have been replicated that these phenomena do exist, and things like a quantum field, or it might be referred to by others as the Akashic field, but that really every possibility for everything exists in this field, and we can interact with it and
Right.
bring into form um, the possibilities that eventually we want to do. And I will just share one thing quickly. I've been listening to over the past few months in fits and starts Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. And when I first started listening to that, it was entertaining, but part of my mind, still wanted to be skeptical about a lot of the phenomena that he shares in that book. But after thinking about it more, after um, being introduced to your all's work, one day I was listening to it and it just made absolute sense
Mm.
that all of that could be possible.
Right.
And the reason that it isn't more common is because our minds aren't working in that way to allow that interaction. So what I do want to make sure that I don't want to communicate to anyone here with us today or that might watch this in the future that we're talking about some trick or something glitchy that is new agey or something. These are, and to, much to Dianne and yours credit, you have made it a point to tie this work to the science that has been documented and reported. So
Right.
I think it's
Yeah.
important to not
It,
get this confused with some kind of thing that's just glamorous.
right. Well, look, first off, the just answer one, just to make a comment on something you said, like QuantumThink was designed. One of the brilliant things about what Dianne has done here when she invented QuantumThink and she put it together is it's holographic,
Hmm.
which is one of the distinctions. The first distinction out of the 21 distinctions is holistic and holographic. And what I mean by holographic, and this is what's so amazing about it, is that the entire system, and this is what's unique about it, the entire system exists in each of the distinctions, even though each of the distinctions are unique. And so that's an unusual kind of thing. You can get the whole system from one distinction. But so that I wanted to say that to you. So don't worry about the other 11. Read the book and you'll get the other 11. And they're great reading. So there's some tremendous thought forms throughout all of it. It's all transformational. I mean, I'll just share you an interesting story. When Dianne was when we were at the studio and Dianne was recording the audio version of Do You Quantum Think? This was last year. And she was reading a chapter, I think, on realities, on new realities. And as she was reading it, I was in the engineering room with the engineer who was, I was just listening. All I was doing was listening. And the engineer was reading along with her, make sure it was correct and managing the sound and what have you. And Dianne was in the studio and I'm just listening. And Dianne was reading it. And then all of a sudden, Dianne started coughing. And she would read a paragraph and cough. And then we have to stop and go back and do it again and read another paragraph and stop. Right. And this went on for about 5 minutes. Stop, start, stop, start, cough, cough, stop, start. Right. And so I stopped the action. I went into the studio and I said, Dianne, we are reading the distinction here on new realities. I think you need to create a new reality here where coughing is not included.
Yes.
And immediately Dianne got it immediately and said, you're right, I'm creating a new reality. And guess what? There wasn't another cough.
Yeah.
So there is magic in the quantum world, but where it starts, and I think it's really important to get this across, is that the observer created reality. That distinction is very, very powerful because it really, it brings up what it is that causes us to actually create any reality at all. And that is intent.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
intent is very important to know because intent is functioning 24/7. It does not sleep. It goes forever. It goes on and on and on. But there are two types of intent here. There's what we call the default intent, which comes through, which is part of the old world view, actually, where, it comes in the form of a concern, a worry, jealousy. An intent is an experience. That's what intent is. It's not an outcome. It's not in the physical universe. Intention is in the physical universe. And we make a distinction between intent and intention. Intention is a very specific outcome we want, and it could be linear, and where you're going along a certain, we had an intention to be on this interview together today at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, United States, right? And here we are. That's intention. Intent is the experience. And what the intent does, and you alluded to it before, Ken, intent sets up a relational field, a quantum field, where many things can come into that field and many things can leave the field. There's comings and goings in and out of that field. There are many, in the world of intent, there are many potential outcomes that could happen, where intention is one outcome. But intent can bring many, many different results. And it requires, to be able to be attentive to it, to work with it, it requires a very high level of conscious awareness. Mm-hmm. And this is what QuantumThink does. It raises the level of awareness to a place of conscious awareness, where one is consciously creating the intent versus the intent being there by default. And this is so important because in life, we do have default intents, in our family and at work and with our clients and with our colleagues, where we have a default intent where we may think our boss doesn't listen to us. Our boss doesn't care about me. And when I'm sitting in meetings, my boss is doing something else. He's working in his computer. He's not listening. And we give meaning to that. We give meaning to what's happening, and we live in that meaning as if that's the truth, back to the fixed reality of the old world view. And if we can't see that we're doing that, we're creating a reality that's based on that. Now, this is why the two systems are going on at the same. So we have the old world view that's playing out. It's been there 400 years. It's going to be there until it disappears. That's not our job to disappear it. It will go when it goes. But alongside this, Dianne has got this new system of thinking based in a more updated, in the current reality, in the quantum world. This is the reality we're in. All the technology we have is all quantum-based, all different types of technology. It's not linear. It happens in amazing artificial intelligence. I mean, wherever that's going to take us, right? So there are two different things happening here. So the part of what it takes to be able to function in the quantum world, in the quantum reality, in the QuantumThink worldview, in the worldview that Dianne, has invented here, it requires knowing both systems. You see, if you don't have two systems, you're stuck in one system. Now, people can work very, very well in that. There are some amazing thinkers and people that are working, they don't have the two systems. They have one, but they have produced amazing results in life. And so it works. There's nothing wrong with it per se. We're not saying there's anything wrong, but what we want to do is raise the level of conscious awareness on the planet, because what we see going on in the planet with all these wars and activities that are happening, just locally for ourselves personally, as well as on a global level, the only way that's going to shift, the only way we're going to be able to transcend that, to get out of the matrix, so to speak, is through conscious awareness. There are going to be no set of rules or no legislation that's going to help us do that. There's no amount of money that's going to help us get there. It's going to be a shift in conscious awareness. And this is the beauty of QuantumThink, because when you see two systems and you have an awareness of two systems, it takes conscious awareness to take the leap from the old system to the new system, because you have to first become aware of where you are. And if you're not happy with where you are, if you're not getting what you want from where you are, just the act of noticing it, the conscious act. And when I say conscious, it's like being aware of what you are aware of. To say it in the most simplistic way. What is consciousness? Yes, we can go out there in the spiritual world, but in the everyday world that we live in, when we get out of meditation and open our door and get in our car, in the everyday world, I would say that to be conscious awareness is being aware of what you are aware of. And if you are aware of what you are aware of, and you're not happy with where you are or whatever's going on in a relationship or business or whatever, and you have QuantumThink, just being aware of where you are will naturally leap you, no process needed. You don't have to remember anything. I didn't have to remember about my parents. I didn't remember, it just went away. This is transformation. It's like then all of a sudden you leap and you start thinking from the distinctions and principles of QuantumThink. Then you are in a new dimension, you are in expanded, and basically you are at choice. And this is really important, because in the old worldview, if you don't have an old worldview and a new worldview, you actually don't have choice. You can make decisions, but the decisions are based on options. They're not based in awareness, in conscious awareness.
Right, right.
So I don't know if that was a little heavy, maybe, but
no, I think, I mean, that part of what the hope or intent of this is of not just this conversation, but IFGT's work to bring the wisdom to more of collective consciousness that understands how, first of all, what this information is, but also how to live it, as we've said. And so I will absolutely agree with you that the experience I had with the material is, it is not something that I would say that I went into a trance state or anything mystical happened. It is, as you said, very simply that once you become aware of something that you weren't aware of before, the genie never goes back in the bottle.
Right.
and you have made a shift.
That's right.
And that continues to grow. And I think then the part of this that may feel a bit more mystical, if someone were completely unfamiliar with this, is the idea that once you have opened up more and more to the infinite possibilities that is the reality, rather than the very limited ones that we have been assuming was the entire spectrum of reality. And when you begin to dissolve that, I'm coming up with a couple of images. One that more people may know about now is the Matrix, but also if you're Star Trek fans, and they had the holodeck, right? And some of the episodes you didn't even know that they were on the holodeck until they pressed the off button and it just was a black room.
Right.
Right. And so that's a kind of a visual description, I think, of part of what you're talking about, is that once we begin to recognize that we're in the holodeck and recognizing that what we thought was so real isn't that at all, really, and it may not be real at all. We may have made the whole thing up, or it's not the only reality. But then there is that other level that your work introduces that says, now that you're that open, now you can allow yourself to believe there could be such a thing as a quantum field, and then begin to interact with that in conscious, deliberate ways, not just in a, wow, wouldn't that be cool if I could do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, Ken, one of the things that the people that I work with, the ones that live their life with this, they're using QuantumThink all the time. They're creating an intent. Anytime they go into a meeting, they're creating an intent. And they're creating an intent. This again is, I want to underscore this because, because we're trained in the old world view, we're looking always at the physical. We're looking at the point of view that action is what gives us results.
Right.
Because that's where you naturally would go if that's the paradigm we've grown up in, right? And our predecessors before that, that's the paradigm. So we always focus on action. We're not focusing on that. What is it that's shaping the action? What's shaping the action is the thought, the intent, the context that you're functioning in. But people are not trained to go there. We don't think about that. We don't think about, well, what intent do I have in this conversation? What intent do I have, if I'm talking to a client or I'm talking to a colleague or I'm creating something brand new in my business, a new strategy or something of that nature? What is the intent that I have? What experience do I want other people to have? What experience do I want to have? And this is so important because there is nothing out there. Really, when you really look at it, it's kind of obvious that we know that we are influencing our own experience a little bit. We know to some extent we are, right? That our reality, how we experience life is our reality. But what we don't, then it starts to break down a bit because we don't necessarily think that how we experience somebody else, we could come to terms with the fact that that's our reality, how we experience somebody else. So there's how we experience us, and there's how we experience somebody else. And we could see that that's our reality. What we don't see is that how somebody else experiences us is also our reality 100%.
That's the holistic holographic reference.
Totally. It's holographic, absolutely. Because there's not how, when I say, like, oh, my boss doesn't like me, well, where does that live? That doesn't live with my boss. That lives with me. And then even one step further is how somebody else experiences somebody else. Again, that's us. There isn't anything out there that's not us. We're projecting all of it. And so learning QuantumThink and understanding the power of intent, you can begin to create the experience of another person. You can create their experience with you. It's not just about your experience with them. That may exclude them. But when you create, because everything is interrelated and interconnected, right? There's nothing separate here. That's the old worldview. The new worldview, everything is one whole. It's all connected in some way, whether we see it or not. It's connected. So therefore, we can create the experience somebody else is having of us. So when we create the experience somebody else is having with us, we are actually in that experience when we do it. And that's what helps it manifest. That's what brings it into existence. Is that I'm creating their experience, but I'm the creator of their experience. And, and that influences it. That brings it about.
And that's where I think there's this kind of nice interweaving of practicing to increase your conscious awareness, and then understanding how to work with intent.
Absolutely. Because look, we all have relationships, and no matter how wonderful our relationships are, we have moments when we're not happy in our relationship. We're frustrated with the person that we're talking with. And obviously, 50% of the people that get married get divorced. So there's obviously something going on there, right? So would somebody in their right mind create a negative intent for somebody they love? No, they're not choosing that. It's operating in the background. It's part of the worldview. We don't have to take it so personal. It's not us, it's the worldview. Because once any thought has ever been created, it exists in what Dianne has lovingly invented, the thoughtosphere. Once a thought exists anywhere by anybody, that thought exists in the thoughtosphere. And it could land on us at any given moment. And so we need to be consciously aware that just because we are having that thought does not make it the truth. And it doesn't even make it ours. It's passing through us, stops for a moment in time and hangs out in our head or wherever it hangs out, right? And then moves on.
And I just want to say, related to something you mentioned earlier, that in addition to this work having its basis in quantum science, it's also very nicely aligned with the wisdom. And what you just shared, I can say from the studies I'm doing of one presentation of the new thought form wisdom, what you just talked about in terms of they don't use the term thoughtosphere, but it's very consistent with part of what I've learned there too. So the wisdom is the wisdom. So you will find consistency, which is part of what we tried to present last month, is our introduction in this program to that general set of ideas. And so it shouldn't be surprising, and it's not to me anymore, but as people become more familiar with the wisdom, to see it reflected in this work only makes perfect sense, because the wisdom.
It does. And Ken, what I've come to sort of learn for myself a little bit is that when you're in the right conscious state of mind, you experience a rightness about things. It could be, doesn't matter what it is. You could be the most complicated negotiation with all kinds of money and finance and whatever, or it could be just, where are you going for dinner tonight? It could be, and anywhere in between those two things. The more aware you are, the more consciously aware you are, then the more you get to experience the rightness of something. And the more you're in that rightness, the more it works for everybody. And, and in business, it's important to have things work for everybody. And we have one of the distinctions of QuantumThink: transformation is distinct from change, being in the right question. And what Dianne put in there, she put in a really nice question that we can all relate to in any way. And that is, how can we have this work for everybody?
And that, I re-listened to something the other day where Dianne, you were talking about that in the live audio coaching part of the materials, and you make the point in that excerpt that the exact wording that Alan just used, how can I have this work for everyone? Very important distinction from the question, how can I make this work for everyone? Right?
Yes. Yeah, because make goes back to action. It goes back to doing. And like having, you may not do anything. It may just being in the question, how can I have this work, has you thinking with that level of intent. There's no doing. And I'll tell you, it's quite magical how that can, what kind of conversations open up. You don't even have to say, if you're in a meeting with a half a dozen people or more, whatever, you don't actually have to say. It can be literally your intent, because remember, the intent is about the experience. So how can we have this work for everyone is an intent. It doesn't have to be spoken. Energetically, it will have an impact on the people in the room. And what you notice, and this is sort of like the quantum side of it, is people will start saying things that are consistent to it. They may say, well, how can I have this work for, my client? Or how can I have this work for the group of people that are not necessarily in the room right here? the language that comes out of people's mouths somehow corresponds perfectly to the intent. I laugh my head off with this so many times. That's actually how it works. That it's just, but you've got to be aware of it. And
Right.
particularly today, I think more so than any other time, because things are moving so fast that we cannot keep up with information. We cannot keep up with all the things happening in the physical world, all the demands made on us, or the requests made of us, or the things that need to be altered and fixed and changed. And we can't keep up with it. We have to go to another level of being able to relate to what's happening in our world, in our life. And it requires, as I say, a whole nother level of conscious awareness. And QuantumThink provides it just in being able to distinguish old worldview thinking from new worldview is in and of itself a conscious act, because you have to be aware of what you are aware of to be able to, and that's what gives you the visibility.
Your work makes a very important and enlightening point about context and content. So maybe we can come back to that in a moment. But the idea that this tipping point is that there will be a time when a critical mass of humanity is thinking along these lines, is this becomes the norm. And your program is one very concrete example, in my opinion at least, of how movement in that direction can be realized.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm glad you brought that point up, Cam, because if you're looking from the whole, and the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, right? If you're looking from the whole, the only way you can actually access really the looking from the whole is if you understand context and content.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the old worldview focuses us on content. It does not focus on context. And it's in the mind. It's a mind thing. It's not a brain thing. This is another thing where people, they collapse mind and brain as if it's one thing. It is not. We have a mind. A mind is it's infinite, because you can't locate a mind. You can locate a brain. If you do surgery on somebody, you open somebody up, you will find a brain, but you will not find a mind. So where does mind exist? If it doesn't exist in time and form, that means it exists everywhere. And this is what gives power to intuition, because intuition is functioning outside of what we can physically deal with in our five senses. Intuition is a whole nother thing, and intuition is accessing non-locality. It's accessing what is not local to our physical world. And so that's another very, very important aspect of this. But you've got to have context, and QuantumThink is a contextual program, basically. Yeah. It's contextual. Right. And what people are doing is shifting the context for themselves. They're shifting the context of how they're relating in work. They're shifting the context of how they're relating to their loved ones. They're shifting the context of how they relate to themselves. And when you shift the context will have a direct impact on the content. But the content, if you're working in content, it has no effect on the context.
Yes, and that then is also kind of tying back into what you are aware of, and realizing that your thoughts or opinions, etc., about a particular situation, let's say, that's the context. And once you realize that all that is a context that you're putting all of that information together in and saying, okay, well, this is a nice house, and that's a context, because all of the programming that's gone in to make those value judgments say, this is nice. But another context could come up with the opposite, or it could come up with, on the infinite spectrum of possibilities, that very next degree that you could barely see any space between, but it would be just slightly different. That's one of the takes
Yeah,
I took on
that's
this.
good. That's beautiful. Absolutely. And that's exactly right, Ken. In the arena of context, there is no true or false.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not true. It's not false. It's a framework. It's a perspective that you're choosing consciously to live from. It's not true, it's not false, and it's not positive thinking either. And I want to just say this, because positive thinking exists by virtue of negative thinking. You can't have positive, they're the opposites on the same parallel, right? They're on the same spectrum. And and I say it like this, like having a positive thought does not get rid of a negative thought. And what people tend to do is they have a negative thought. They're aware enough to know they have a negative thought. But in the absence of a new system of thinking, what they come up with is a positive thought to offset the negative thought. However, here's where it gets troublesome, is because in the context of an old worldview that sees things as fixed and static, we relate to the negative thought as if it's the truth. And you cannot create another thought on top of something that already exists. Yeah. If the glass is full of water, you cannot add more water to it. So that's why we say in the quantum worldview there are no absolutes in the physical universe. We're not talking about the divine here. We're talking about in the physical world that we live in, there are no absolutes. And if you know that, that means it's infinite. You can create anything that you want. You can create any intent that you want, knowing it's not true or false, but it's a perspective. It's a place that you want to come from. And that shapes how you see the content. And it shapes how other people influence relate to the content. So you can, it's quite expansive here. That what you can do.
So I want to say a couple things before I ask you a question. One, I've been monitoring the chat. I haven't seen anybody pop up, but if anyone does want to join the conversation or submit a question, please do that. We're going to go for a little while longer. We're a little over an hour now, and just there's one or two other things I want to mention. However, throughout this program, Alan, you've demonstrated why you've earned those titles and why you're so welcomed and appreciated by all these thousands of people that you work with. It is a gift. I mean, it really is. It's such a pleasure for me to listen to you talk and teaching this material, and your passion for it is so genuine. I think that's what just comes through so easily. I do want to remember that the idea of this discussion in part is to say, okay, how can this become part of our daily life and affairs, if you will, or everyday life? And so to the people that haven't had the opportunity to get further into this than what they've just heard you talking about, and or may be skeptical, can you give an example or two, some things that have stood out in clients that you've worked with that are in the corporate world, which old world thinking has all sorts of attributes, right, that aren't true? But we think about corporate world, at least I do, is, it's you got to get work done, you got to be productive, and there's all sorts of measures, and you have shareholders to please. And so to some, including some old perspectives that I carried, it would seem like we don't have time for any of this woo-woo stuff. You got to get the job done, right? But yet you have had lots and lots of interactions and apparently great success. So I'm wondering if there are a couple of examples you might give, or at least one, of what you've seen in a sector of life that at least I wouldn't have normally associated with consciousness.
Okay. Well, I'll give a couple. When we've done corporate programs, we've done many corporate programs, and I'll give you one. Like, even though people are, well, where QuantumThink hits people the fastest, okay, like where you feel the impact of it the fastest is in the areas where you're the most deeply committed. The areas that are most important to you in your life is where you're going to see an impact. And so a very simple one, and then I'll give a more complicated one, but a simple one that I've always that always puts a smile on my face is that when we've done these programs and we've had all kinds of people in them, in the corporate world, and people would come in and share, because one of the things, let me say this, that in each of the distinctions of QuantumThink, and there are 10 of them on the audio program that you listen to, that people could go to the site, the quantumthink.net site, and they can read, even whether they buy the program or not. There's so much to read and grasp there that's completely free, that you can that they can and they can listen to the introduction, which is very, very powerful if you get into it. So there's a lot of free stuff there. People come into the program, and where it hits them first. So each of the distinctions of QuantumThink has and this is the brilliance of what Dianne has created, has a recreation at the end of it. So the distinction that lays out the distinctions are like 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe at the most. Longer, more in depth in the book, Do Your QuantumThink. But the audio program is very short. They're like 15, 20 minutes long in length. And it distinguishes the distinction, so you could get a sense of what it is. You're learning about it, and you're getting immersed in it. And then at the end, there's a recreation, and the recreation is designed to bring what you just learned into your awareness. So this is where the raising of the conscious awareness takes place, because you become aware of it in the course of your day. Just going out into your day. And to your point, how do you bring it into your day? Well, this is how you bring it into your day. The program's designed to bring it into your day right off the bat, right? So when we did our programs, what we would do is, before Dianne had the book, we would deliver the distinctions from a script on a teleconference call. And that would be part of the call. Every day we would do a program, and it would be an hour and 15 minutes. I'm not going to go into the details of the program, but part of that hour and 15 minutes was I would deliver the distinction off a script and give the recreation. And the next day when we come back to the program, I would have people share what results they got, right? And one of the things that always tickled me was that parents would tell me that they went home, and they were sitting down at dinner, and their child would get up and go do his homework. And they're amazed, because they tried everything to get their child to do his homework. They would try bribing him, threatening him, paying him off, whatever. And they could never get their child to do the homework or clean the room or help in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, without any commentary from them, nothing, no words out of their mouth whatsoever, that child would get up and do the homework, or get up and clean the table, or get up and do something, and actually start to tell the parent things the parent always wanted to hear. And the parent didn't have to ask for it. That is a quantum occurrence. When your child gives you what you want them to give you, and you didn't ask them to give it to you. And you'd been asking them forever to give it to you, and they would never give it to you. And from what happened was, they recognized, and this is what happened, is they recognized the old worldview. They recognized their judgments about their child. They recognized their expectations they had of their child. They became aware of how they were relating to their child. And when they caught it, QuantumThink kicked in, and it went away. The judgments went away. The expectations went away, and the child was free to get up and do exactly what they wanted them to do. That is a quantum experience. And I call that a simple one. That's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's
all the time. All the time. So that's a simple one. Now I'm going to give you one that was like huge. Okay, a big huge, like that's the little one. This is also huge what I gave you, but it's still more of a simple one. We had a client who was the president of a major corporation here in the United States, and his division of this company was the cash cow of the company, but they did not get recognized. They were sort of treated like a stepchild for a number of reasons that, that they would say, for whatever the reasons, they just weren't getting recognized by his peers who were presidents of other divisions, and also by the CEO and the chairman. His team was not getting recognized. And actually, they were frowned upon because they were doing business with the competitors. And this was an old school company, and it just didn't approve of the fact that they were doing business with the competitors, right? So they just cast them aside, even though they were generating all kinds of money. And this really bothered him because his team worked hard and they were doing good work. So we did a program with him and his team. And what he created in this program, he created an intent and an intention. He created a quantum experience that he wanted to have his team feel valued and feel that they were welcomed into the company, that they were appreciated for their work, and that they felt that his team felt like they belonged, basically. All right, that was that intent, and measured by many different things. But anyway, we went into the program. And about halfway through the program, there was an article written, a one-page article written in the Wall Street Journal. It was an interview that was done by the Wall Street Journal with the CEO of a competitive company. And the CEO of this competitive company said in this interview that the work that this president and his team were doing was the future of that industry. And that the next day, all the doors flew open. His peers were knocking on the door. What is it your team are doing? We love it. We want to meet with you. What are you doing? And the chairman and the CEO called him. And from that moment on, they were invited into meetings that before they were excluded from. They got funding for projects that before they couldn't get funding for. And they were now a full part accepted in this company. Now, to somebody outside, they may think, well, that was a coincidence. But this president knew it was totally consistent with his intent. And this was one of the people who could say it wasn't the program, although he values the program. And I've been working with this guy for over 20 years, right? And so it's like he knew that it was how he was thinking. It was his intent that actually caused that. And it wasn't cause and effect, because in the quantum world, things do not move linearly. They move in quantum leaps. They move backwards and forwards in time. They go in every direction you can imagine. And that's what happened. This was something that was not linear. It wasn't expected. It wasn't even in his imagination that it would happen that way. But it happened.
Thank you for those examples. I hope those are found by many to be helpful, and to also begin to bridge that gap, because you made a good point to acknowledge the skeptics that some might just see that as coincidence, but it was the knowing. And what that reminded me of was there are other settings where we might more naturally be able to be in that mindset. Traditionally, it could be like in nature, sunsets, something that you feel that awe and you just have that sense of connectedness with everything.
Right.
But as soon as you get into rush hour traffic or into the office building or whatever it is, that can dissipate. And I believe what you're describing is it's always there.
Right.
It is the way the mind works to lose sight of that. And it's consistent with some of what our guest last month was talking about in terms of the veil of forgetting and some of those things. And I think the work is to, as you put it before, raising our awareness of what we're aware of. And then once we begin to apply that 24/7, and there are some that talk about even being able to carry this into sleeping states and whatnot. But
you actually pointed to the methodology of QuantumThink. The methodology of QuantumThink is the art of distinguishing. And what we're saying is we don't have something that you don't, that we have and you don't. And the art of distinguishing is distinguishing what is already there and has always been there And the art of distinguishing it is to distinguish it in a way that people will either see it for the first time, like they haven't seen it ever before, like it's a room in their house they just discovered, right? That's the art of distinguishing. It's always there, or they distinguish it in a way that they knew it was there, they had been using it before, but they're now seeing it in a completely new way. They've got a whole new, right, which is giving them an access to a whole new avenue of action and results produced. So that's a very important part here. The art of distinguishing is the methodology of QuantumThink. And we're saying exactly what you said. We're not going to give you something you don't already have. We're just going to point it out in a way that you're going to see it in a way you have never seen it before.
Yeah, and that I would absolutely agree with from the experience I had so far, without question. And I think bringing old world thinking into this, and again, expecting this to be something where you flip a switch and your life is completely different, that's not going to happen. But you will begin to notice more and more and more of what you have been assuming to be your reality or the way things are, and those fall away. And for some of us, I'll speak personally,
Could happen, but it could happen instantly. It can.
Okay.
It's not like it won't. It can. Anything that's an infinite possibility universe, it can happen. You know, we're going to. One of the distinctions of quantum thinking is going beyond time. You don't. It's not in the audio program. It is in the book. You can go beyond time. It can. You take time out of the equation, and things happen instantly.
I would agree and see it from different contexts, but it makes sense to me. So yeah, no, that's well, many of these conversations that I'm privileged to be able to participate in, I could go on and on and on, and the generosity of guests like you make it so. And also, I know there's much more to cover, but I want to probably wrap it up here. And I do want to thank you both again, Dianne. Anything that you want to add, I would be remiss not to at least offer that to you.
Thank you. I want to say a quantum occurrence because, well, first of all, I really enjoyed listening to both of you in conversation. I always enjoy listening to each of you, and together it was just really, it's enlightening. It's not like, you know, and this is really the beauty of the art of distinguishing and coming into it like we are connected to all infinite knowledge. And what we do for one another in the IFGT and in these arenas where we're inspired to live the wisdom, when we listen to others, it distinguishes, it brings it alive in us. Every aspect of the wisdom, and to hear it from another perspective, and it activates the wisdom in our present moment experience. And so that's what I got from being here. And I always enjoy, you know, I've listened to Alan lead so many programs, and I always love, you know, like, wow, that's a good way of saying it. And really brilliant. But here's the quantum occurrence for tonight. So anyway, thank you both. I was thinking, well, what could I ask Alan, you know? And one of the things I thought was that I wanted to ask Alan to talk about the art of distinguishing, because that is the methodology of QuantumThink. And then there it was. So I did want to say that. And I just appreciate being many years on the board of the Institute for Global Transformation, which we shortened by saying IFGT, and appreciating Marianne and the late Marianne Miller and the beloved late Matthew Miller, late husband of Marianne, co-founders of it, and that it's been here for 20 years and counting. And that is something, you know, when you have that level of sustainability of an organization such as this, and it's been evolving with all new people here and Ken at the helm here, that there's something in a very deep, divine vibrational sense that enables us to do what we call the work of this organization, which is to awaken consciousness within ourselves. And within ourselves, as Alan was pointing out, that it emanates out to the people close to us and to the world. And so what I'm feeling, and I want to end with saying that I'm grateful to be part of IFGT and to, of course, have the wisdom of QuantumThink come through me and be able to share it, and to have like an outstanding, illustrious, literal master QuantumThink coach in Alan as my partner. So thank you.
What a beautiful way to put your fingerprint on this, which of course your fingerprints are all over it, but I really appreciate that, as I'm sure Alan probably does too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Anything else that we didn't cover that you want to make sure that's mentioned before we wrap it up?
I appreciate the dialogue, Ken. You know, it's great questions, and and it was good. The conversation was good. I really appreciate you creating a space for me to do what I'm passionate about. And for the people that are watching this both live right now, as well as I know you'll be putting on on social media, feel free to go to quantumthink.net or go to the IFGT website, where where information about us is, and there's lots of free material. And if you really want to get really get involved with this, but you can get the audio, and if you get the audio, by the way, a large part of the proceeds of that will go to IFGT to support the work we're doing there. So that's a big contribution there as well. And we just it's just I appreciate you having me here and giving me the opportunity to say the things that I have.
Well, thank you again. And the feeling I have is extremely mutual. I mean, I've enjoyed this thoroughly. Of course, the book is still available at all the usual places, Amazon, etc. And you mentioned this during the interview, but I will also mention that the 10th anniversary of the book was a year ago, I believe, and somewhat, at least to commemorate that, is when the Audible version of that was created. So it is available now, both in audio format too. And
the audio is really special. I mean, you heard the story, I mean, people can have awakenings from just listening to it. It's amazing.
Thank you all so much, those of you who attended.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Acknowledge that I have a wonderful uncle who is joining us for some of these, and he's here tonight. So thank you, Ned. And for those who see this in the future, our deepest hope is that you find this when you're ready, and it is something that helps you in every way, and you become part of this elevating consciousness that we know is so important. So thank you all again. Have wonderful, safe evenings and the rest of the week and rest of life. So
yes, thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks
everybody.
again.